Excellent. So we're going to talk about relationship success rules today. We're going to identify and apply the 11 success rules to create happy relationships. These 11, each of them are huge and they make a big deal, and relationships are an important part of everyone's life. So we want to get clear on how to create success and not leave it to chance, because whenever you want success in anything important to you in life, you usually get lessons or coaching or education or something that helps to guide you. However, society has really dropped the ball when it comes to relationships. Oftentimes we don't get that clarity we need. So we're going to make sure that we get maximum return on investment for our relationship efforts by going through these 11. So number one is an easy one, just to get the ball rolling. It's know what not to do. So I'm going to put this question out there just as a fun way to get the dialogue going. What are the surest ways to kill a relationship? Okay. What are the surest ways to kill a relationship? Who has some suggestions?
Talk to them. Don't say nothing. Don't communicate at all.
Don't communicate. Go.
Yeah, do something like this.
Oh, there she goes. That's it. We're done, Patty. You're no longer in the group. I'm just kidding. Eternal love and respect. I love that. I love how you articulate with that. Okay, give the silent treatment. Don't communicate. Who else has an idea?
Yeah, good. Charmaine?
Oh, well, blame or criticize people.
Blame and criticize people. Yeah. Joel?
Pretty much like whatever you don't like done to you, right? The golden rule.
Yeah, do the reverse golden rule. Like the fool's golden rule. Fool's gold.
I think stifling them, like you're stifling things that fulfill them.
Yeah.
So like
encourage them to be anyone but themselves. Right. Okay, that's a great one. Coots, do you have a good suggestion on what not to do in relationships?
Yeah, get complacent. And doing the same thing no matter what. Like I love the whole always date your wife.
Yes, love it. Love it.
Are you keeping track of?
And I would say, a good thing to do too, like one thing to be aware of is being overly focused on yourself. Selfishness, right? Selfishness can kill relationships. Be fearful and paranoid all the time. Fear is relationship poison, I think. And another one is expectations. Oh yeah, have really super unrealistic expectations, right? And then another one is always insist on having things your way. Right now, and that one's a good one to kind of like get the ball rolling. Anyone want to add anything else to this one?
Seeing the other person as an extension of you versus as another individual.
Okay. Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. So number two, so that's number one. Number two is to have a proper purpose for your relationships. Okay. Have a proper purpose for your relationship. So I want you to think about your primary relationship with your spouse or significant other, if you're in one. Or think about the next relationship you want to be in, perhaps romantic relationship. What do you think are some good examples of the purpose for the relationship? And then we'll talk about some bad examples for a relationship purpose. Okay? So what are some good purposes for relationships? Who has a thought on this?
I think for encouragement, or a place that you can kind of share your thoughts freely and have like a home base to kind of talk things out.
Yeah. Bring out the best in others and support them. That's a good purpose, to support each other's evolution, spiritually, emotionally, and everything else. Patty?
Procreate, have family.
Okay. Having a family. Who else has an idea on primary? And think about this, like, what is your purpose in your relationships? Like, what is it? Do you even know what it is?
Unconditional love.
Excellent. Unconditional love. And you might say, for me, it would be an educational and entertaining experience to serve, grow, and perfect the ability to love.
I think also that kind of relationship is for intimacy, companionship. There's safety in that relationship. And you're also, I think, Tony Robbins' 6 core human needs are being magnified through your relationship. So there's, the need for security, the need for variety, the need for love, the need for significance, the need for growth, and the need for giving. And so when we're doing that together and purposeful in it, not only are we emotionally supporting one another, mentally, intellectually stimulating one another, spiritually growing together, but also physically manifesting purpose.
Excellent. Love it.
And
think a
procreating.
place is-
Did I mention that?
And being complacent, is that what you said?
I think also it's a place where you can be safe enough to be yourself. Because I think a lot of times people aren't ready to show that to the outside world, but it's where you can be vulnerable.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think, we've got a lot of good examples, and I would encourage people to answer this to yourself. What is the primary purpose of your relationship? And then here are some key considerations. Does it include fun? Right? Does it include growth, particularly improving our growth and our ability to love? And, to some degree, does it focus us on the giving rather than always the getting, right? So those might be some good things to consider. And then, what are some not so good reasons to be in a relationship and purposes for a relationship? What do you think are some examples of some not so good ones?
To take.
Yeah. To make
Somebody
it
to
all
fight
about
with.
me. Yeah, to just have fun and nothing else might be a not so great one, right? To need someone to complete me, which can be a very, it reinforces that I'm not enough as I am, right? Or, you might say, because I don't want to have to worry about money anymore, so I'm going to be in a relationship with this wealthy person.
Perfectly acceptable.
Yeah. Any other ideas on some not so good purposes?
Boost your self-esteem. If you're that, if you are lacking positive self-image, self-esteem, and you're getting your fix off of a relationship, it's draining and it's unhealthy.
Yeah, I was gonna say
so-
enabling, alcoholics or
Enabling,
something.
yeah.
Hey, he drinks, so I drink. It's perfect. That's maybe not.
Mhm. Yeah,
If
but
one person's
enabling,
just a safety net and,
Yeah,
that other
sure.
person's not learning to live on their own 2 feet.
safety net for our fears. Coots mentioned enabling, and I think enabling is usually it's the dark side of loyalty. And people don't talk about it, but there's a dark side to loyalty, and that's blind loyalty. And that's when you stand by the unwholesome or even evil actions and behaviors of someone just as an act of loyalty rather than, being able to help somebody in the way they best need to be helped, right? So that you can see a lot of that out there. So anyway, that's a big area that a lot of people don't really explore. What's your proper purpose in relationship? And sometimes there's even a spiritual response to this. Sometimes people might say, to expand the limits of human consciousness and towards universal awareness and union and eternal truth. Somebody might say spiritual union through the physical that leads to universal and divine love. Gandhi said something like that for the purpose of relationships. But once again, not all relationships are meant to last forever, but I believe they are all meant for growth in some way. And I think it's important to have that piece in it. Now, let's go on to number 3. Number 3 is know your relationship success indicator and know that it's appropriate. So here's just a fill in the blank. What will it take for you to know the relationship is working? What are your thoughts?
Number one, that we're emotionally connecting and supporting one another emotionally and caring for one another's emotional needs in a healthy way. That
So
we're intellectually,
emotional fulfillment. Love it.
that we are challenging one another, and so, in intellectual growth, personal development, things like that. Spiritually, that we're grounded and connected with our creator together, and that that there's chemistry and passion and for each other in a very physical, primal way.
I think you kind of nailed the 4 categories I was going to try to make sure everyone commented on. Patty, you did so good there. That was incredible. So Patty's saying, like we should all ask ourselves, what do I need from my partner to feel emotionally fulfilled? What do I need from my partner to be mentally fulfilled? She mentioned like personal development and challenging each other. What do I need from my partner to be spiritually fulfilled? And sometimes from your partner, you just need them to respect the path you're on, right? And rather than insist that you go on the exact same spiritual path they might be on, right? And then what do I, and then we talked about like passion, fulfillment, physical passion, whatever it might be, what has to happen to feel fulfilled in that area as well, right? So think about what some specific answers are. And now Coots mentioned, to always date your wife. And I think this is like really good because a lot of times we do these things for each other in the beginning of a relationship, that we're doing the things that make it successful in those 4 pillars. But then, when you roll some kids into the mix and busy work-life balance challenges, all of a sudden we start to compromise what should be the foundation for our life, which is that primary relationship. And so we let the relationship mutate into a degraded version of what it once was. We allow it to decay. And this could be false advertising. It's like, hey, we valued these behaviors and we valued doing this for each other in the beginning, but now we don't value that stuff anymore. Now we value, overworking and putting everyone else first, except for my spouse, putting the kids first. A lot of people think that sounds very virtuous, but it doesn't really even set a good example for your kids to see that you're treating your spouse as, a secondary factor in your life, right? That's a common misperception a lot of people might have, right? So anyway, anyone have any thoughts on this that they care to share?
You kind of said it there. I was kind of thinking that one of the things that you'll know if the relationship is working is time. It's like, everyone's always worried when someone gets engaged in the first month, but if it's been 5 years, they're like, oh, good, that's good, right? Because time, it does take time to understand if that is a bond that's meant for longevity.
Yeah. Excellent.
I think also consistency, and that's kind of what you were alluding to before. We do get busy with life, and one of the books I'd recommended to people here a while back was Everybody Fights, so you might as well get good at it. And one of the chapters in there was talking about treating your spouse as a stranger, because we're so polite to strangers. A lot of times we drop that filter with our spouses.
Yeah. So excellent. So we should always just double check on some of these things here. So the main criteria is this: whatever you need as your success indicator, we want to know that it's appropriate. So somebody might say, well, I want my spouse to, always be making over $1 million a year, be paying for our country clubs, memberships, and trips around the world, and this and that. And they have to also maintain less than 15% body fat at all times, and blah, blah, blah. So anyway, the answer here for a lot of people could be very unrealistic. So we want to just ask ourselves, is this unrealistic? Also, is this in alignment with the purpose that we defined for the relationship? Is it effort focused? It should always be focused on efforts, not outcomes. We can't control the outcomes, right? And is it clear, and can it be satisfied in a very specific way, right? So we might say, well, emotional fulfillment, What do I need? I need support. Well, what does that mean? You know, it might mean that they connect with you every day just to see how you're doing, even if they're apart. Like, we need to get specific on how that factor can be fulfilled, right? So that's something to think about. And that brings us to point number 4 of 11, and that is to clarify the communication needs. Clarify the communication needs. Anyone have any thoughts on this subject? On what I might be meaning by that?
Well,
Kind of like you were. Go
Okay.
ahead, Joel.
I noticed with my relationship with my wife is, I not to stereotype, but she loves communication and loves talking, like sharing, like what happened in the day, the stories. And I'm very cerebral. Like, I think like all day long, but I don't talk that much. So it's and this might be a common challenge, but definitely it requires me to get out of my shell and try more.
Okay.
He wants to know what's going on in your head.
Yeah. So there's 5 communication considerations. Number 1 should be frequency of communication. How frequent should communication be? For some people, it's once a day. Some people, it's twice a day, 3 times a day. Some people, it might be every hour or 2. I don't know if you've ever been in a relationship with somebody where if you don't text them back in like 2 or 3 hours, they think you're mad at them. Like, oh my gosh, did I say something wrong? And it's like, what? Like, what? This is a level of frequency of communication that's definitely more intense, right? So we might want to think like, what's appropriate for us? Like, we should be clear on this because we want to be able to communicate our needs. Like, what is your need on frequency of communication? Anyone have any thoughts to share on this one?
I think it's good that that not only communication is talked about, but style of communication and frequency, right? Is kind of been the 2 that have come up. But if we don't communicate about it, then we have a lot of unmet expectations or frustrations.
You're right. We need to communicate about communicating. And you talk about style, and I talk about form of communication. You know, like, what is acceptable to you? Does it have to be face-to-face? Is text or email okay? How about phone calls? Yes or no? Right? Some people don't like to talk on the phone, right? Some people, texting doesn't really count. Dave?
I have like thinking one of my needs that I say for communication. I feel like a lot of people do this. Is like, we need to be both level-headed. If someone's really angry or someone that, you can't have the best communication when you got a sour apple. So I find it's better to sort of wait, like maybe wait, we'll talk later, whatever it might be. I always find it's always best to be at the right time for communication.
Yeah. Timing on communication. So, is there a right or wrong time for it? If you're in a relationship with somebody who just likes me time, maybe we need to respect that. Is there a minimum amount of time needed? Like, you need at least 10 minutes of undivided attention, or is a quick text sufficient? What is too long? What is too short? So timing of communication is definitely, that's definitely one of the 5.
I think something Patty kind of said, though, with the form of communication, it's not just about the form, but sometimes all of that works together. You might be texting and it's clear there's misunderstanding going on. And sometimes I think you just need to recognize that and cut to the chase and change the form of communication, because there's so much personal subtext that goes into something like texting. So I think you also have to be aware of that. It's not always about an agreed form of communication. It's also about making sure that message is received in the way it was intended.
Exactly. It's not what you say, it's what people hear. And that's a very important thing where people can get their wires crossed. And then I think another thing is depth of subject. How openly and honestly do you want to communicate with people? Can you reach out for any silly reason? Like, oh, I'm having the best tuna sandwich today. I just thought I'd let you know, or whatever, or like, what's kind of, appropriate to you there. And what topics, the 5th one would be, what topics are preferred? For example, people often like to talk about, what did you learn at work today or at school today? That's a preferred topic or subject. or what's been good and positive since we chatted last may be a preferred subject because it brings people into a good mood whenever they respond to it, right? So what topics are preferred for, and then what topics are just things you don't want to talk about. Maybe you don't want to talk about work after you've been at work all day, right? So something to think about. I think the key thing here is this. When you go through this with your partner and you're like, okay, what's the frequency of communication that works for you? What style or form of communication? What kind of depth do you want on this is optimal? What timing, what topics? Just know that whatever their answer is the right answer. Because that's what the right answer is for them. There's no right or wrong. You can't say, oh, that's too much, that's too little. That's the right answer, whatever they give you, right?
I think it's
So-
interesting because that's also them communicating their needs to you. It doesn't make it an expectation, but it gives you the opportunity to give to them in the way they would like you to communicate with them.
It's going to give intel. Now, let's go on to number 5 is to understand each other's fight language. How should others best respond to you? You know, what do you do and how should others best respond to you? And what do they do and how are you best to respond? Anyone have any examples you can think of for fight language when there's a disagreement or a disharmony, how people tend to behave?
Well,
Sometimes
David
that can
kind
be
of
where people
alluded
throw
to
their
it,
gloves off.
right?
Oh.
Not David kind of alluded to that when we were talking just a minute about communication, but conflict resolution is huge area of relationship development. And I yield to David.
Oh, yeah, no, yeah, that's kind of what I was mentioning as well there for sure. Like you'll have someone who you can clearly tell they're not to be having calm communication at the moment. So you got to work, I guess that almost comes before that then. You got to make sure they're in the right mindset. And just being able to say the right thing or say nothing is sometimes silence is the best solution.
Yeah.
I think, like, not to diss monkeys or anything, but I think it's probably behaving a little bit like monkeys, where you're just like really reaction based and not really.
This monkeys.
Yeah, like monkey mind, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think
Reacting.
conflict resolution is about explaining what's happening from your perspective rather than expressing it. And, there's a saying in Christendom that says, don't let the sun go down on your anger, which means, resolve your issues before you go to bed. I don't believe in it. I don't subscribe to it. I believe we can give it to God and go to bed and we'll worry about it tomorrow, right? But the energy levels got to be piped down. And I think it's important that if we feel ourselves getting riled up, that we say, hey, you know what? I need to take a break in this conversation and process and regroup. Can we come back to this and give it time, tomorrow after work? It doesn't bleed into the rest of the relationship. We're just tabling the discussion. It allows the other person to go, okay, we're good. We will get back to it. We'll get back to it tomorrow. There's a commitment to that, and that you're following through with it.
Yeah, my wife and I actually have a challenge with that, because sometimes when we get like in really heated discussions, like she just wants to sort it out, and I'm like, I just need like 10 minutes to get out of reaction mode, like calm myself down, and then we can deal with it. She's like, no, we're gonna deal with it now. I'm like, no, I don't want to. Just give me like 5 minutes.
There you go. So it's a really good point, because the different ways people will fight, some people vent and unload, as Patty talked about. They express it rather than explain what they're experiencing, right? They get emotionally charged, and they might be emotionally charged about what somebody else did to them, and they take it out on their partner. Okay? They take it out on the wrong person. All right? Some people need to deal with things right away. They're like, no, we need to talk about this. Don't turn your back on me. Don't go quiet, blah, blah. And they don't want to allow you time to process. The problem is that you might force somebody to communicate too soon, and they say things in the way that doesn't come across as well, because they haven't even articulated it to themselves yet, right? Some people need time and space to process and reflect before they're ready to explain what they're experiencing. Some people avoid it. They choose avoidance. They avoid the topic and conversation. Some people go right to blaming, right? Some people seek first to understand. So there's a number of different ways people deal with disharmony in relationship. I think it's important that we all ask ourselves, what is my primary method? And is it constructive or destructive? Do I avoid fights or do I create conflict? Do I try to see things from their point of view, or do I just try to get my own point of view across? Do I express emotions or do I contain them? So these are some different things we should all consider to get on the same page, right? The biggest challenge you'll see here, some people, when they're in a fight, they want to deal with it right away. Other people like to have time to process. So that just creates more issues, right?
And it's good to talk about these things when you're not in the fight.
Yeah.
Get this out of the way first. The other thing that I've seen people do is walk away or slam a door, leave the physical space, and then go into silent mode, right? Stealth mode, and ignoring. So that's another thing that some people can do. And then lastly, I remember when I was in a relationship and I was explaining something that I didn't like that was happening in the relationship, and I explained it, and I said, if this doesn't change, then I'm not going to be able to continue to be in this relationship. And this person was used to hearing previous partners yell and scream and do all of this stuff. So didn't take what I was saying very seriously until I came back and said, hey, I just want to let you know, we talked about this last month and I'm just reminding you, right? And if this continues, then I'm going to have to walk away. And I ended up walking away from the relationship, and they were in shock and didn't know why. So having this, discussion, just because I'm not loud and obnoxious, but I'm serious about what I'm stating, you're not taking me seriously because I don't have all the animation that's behind it, right?
Yeah. So what that person likely did was their previous partner had an explosive personality and fight language. They responded by softening everything, right? Soften everything, make excuses for them. Don't take those words too seriously because they're harsh and critical. Now they've overdeveloped their softening muscles and they're bringing it into new relationships and they're not taking things seriously, right? So that's a perfect example of how participating in our own self-understanding can best improve our chances of success in relationships in future. I actually tell people, like, the number one thing to succeed in relationships is willingness to participate in your own self-understanding. Most people just don't understand themselves. And if they did, they wouldn't be doing all the things they're doing that are ruining and creating disharmony in relationships. Right?
And the other thing too, going back to communication style, for example, for me at work, I have to give facts. It's short and sweet and succinct, and we're done. I'm in and out in less than 30 seconds, and do not pass go, do not collect $200, and don't talk to me about anything else other than the reason why I'm here. But when I'm in relationship, I tell stories. Like I'm telling stories now, right? Because I don't talk to give information. I have to share a story to make a point. It's just how I'm wired. I can't help it. So I can't give you a short answer. I got to give you a story. And here's another story about my ability to communicate. And that's what I meant by communication style.
Love it. Love it. I love your stories, by the way. I love your stories. And when people tell me stories, I love it. I usually just bottom line it right away.
I love that too. Because I can't bottom line nothing.
That's the key because I chat with a lot of people that are storytellers, but I'm able to help them just bottom line. Here's the key takeaway of this story. So what you're saying is, and I'll sum it up in a sentence or two, right?
Not because the way that I'm saying it is wrong, but because it also furthers the point.
Yeah, it's a very colorful way to illustrate that summary point. And it's often very entertaining as well. Okay, love it. Love it. Anyone else have any thoughts on that? On the whole fight language type conversation. I think it's important to know, like to get clear on what are the wrong ways to respond to you and your fight language, be able to communicate that to people, right? Like Patty's saying, hey, if I say something, I want you to actually take it seriously. Like, don't dismiss it just because you've developed the habit of dismissing things, right? In an ideal world, how should others respond to your fight language? Like, hey, I just want people to respect. I need space and time to process. Don't press me for an answer too soon, right? Or, give me validation. Listen, understand, and then validate. Say, I can understand why you feel that way. Say that immediately. When we're fighting, start out with that. I can understand why you're feeling that way. And then just give all the space, right? Because otherwise people will say something they don't really mean if you press them for an answer too soon. And then it just makes a mountain out of a molehill.
Or they mentally disengage.
Yeah, exactly. So
I think it's important with conflict resolution, though. With each person, it's different. And with different relationships, it's different because different people prefer different styles of communication. So it's not something where you own your communication style and should expect it never changes. I think you have to consider whether or not you need to adapt it to who you're dealing with.
Absolutely. We need to communicate about communication, right? People, and so often people don't do that. And it's like, but this is one of the key things in relationships. And that's why it's why we need to have these success principles outlined and get clear on them. So we do better in our relationships. Now, number 6 is this: know what love means to you. Okay. This one's really important. It's a fill in the blank. I want you to just know how your brain would fill in the blank. And it's this sentence. If you love me, then you'll what? What does your brain fill in that sentence as it applies to the people you're with? How should they love you? How should they express it? Somebody might say you should tell me with words. Somebody might say you should show physical affection, hold my hand, rub my back, snuggle on the couch, whatever. Somebody might say you should buy me things regularly. Buy me nice things. Somebody might say you should, when you're with me, treat me like I'm the only person in the world. Give me your undivided attention. Don't check your phone. That shows me that I'm not important to you. I want to know that I matter enough to you. You're willing to drop all the distractions and just be with me and be present. So there's a lot of different ways that, or, if you love me, then you'll do things to help me out. Everyone has a different expectation, and so often this is not communicated. So does anyone have any ideas on a bad answer for this that you think might be a bad answer that someone might say, or an answer that might just bring more problems? If you love me, then you'll. Anyone have any thoughts on this?
Give me at least $40,000 a year so that I can do the things that I want to do and look good for you and buy clothes and shoes and everything else. That's what I need. That's how I know you love me.
Excellent. That's a great one, Patty. We'll see how that experiment works out.
Can I back out? I want to say 48,000 a year because there's 12 months in a year. Okay, I'm good. Go ahead, David.
No,
There's 52 weeks in a year, though, too.
Oh, dang it. I was thinking 4 weeks for vacation.
Yeah.
You want a paid vacation, though, right?
I call that one the sugar daddy, sugar mama. It's usually tied to some sort of external value.
Hey, I've done pastoral care and coaching over the years, and to see this financial dynamic played out is real. And it's sad. It is so shallow to see these kinds of relationships like this. And then women will backdoor it by having the man's child in order to continue to get money that way. So it's funny. And I speak it in funny, but it is very serious issue and leads to so many problems in people's lives. It's just, and then the mess and collateral damage for the cleanup is horrible. Great.
You also mentioned another one, which is the baby maker. You'll have my child. You're
Yeah.
have my child. If you
Yeah.
love me, then you'll have my child.
Mhm.
Dave, you had something to share?
It's something simple, like if you love me, you'll break the law, or whatever that would be. You know, you'll do this thing for me. We all seen those movies. Doesn't end well.
Yeah, it's a perfect example. If you love me, you'll conspire with me to do bad things. That's the outlaw pattern for sure. That one's a relevant one. How about this? If you'll love me, you'll do whatever I want you to do. I call that one the Mr. Belvedere. You're trying to turn them into a butler. Only to probably realize that you lose interest when they become your butler because they're no longer a challenge.
I think, you've alluded to different positive examples drawing from the, 5 love languages. However, I have found also that in, just for me personally, let's just bring it home. I like to be significant in my partner's life. If you love me, then you'll prioritize me, right? The two shall become one. And so there's a priority there. So, and I know that's not related into quality time or, some of these other things, gifts or acts of service or the need for affirmation or physical touch. But I do believe that it somehow sits in the 6 core human needs that Tony Robbins talks about.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful example. Then you'll prioritize me. Absolutely. That's a good one. We're talking about good examples now, eh? That's a good answer. We've been having fun with the bad answers. Another bad answer, by the way, we didn't call it, it's the doormat. Then you'll just accept me treating you like crap if you love me. I can whine and complain and be totally toxic to you all the time, and you have to accept it if you love me, right? So that's the doormat pattern. Okay, good examples might be you'll prioritize me. It might be you'll listen to me. What else? Anyone else have any thoughts on what some good examples might be for the love rule?
I think if they pay attention, sometimes just paying attention and showing you care. I mean, I saw this thing once where it was like, sometimes I love you sounds like, did you make it home okay? Did you eat today? That kind of thing. And I think if it comes from a good place, that's okay. People can be really independent, but you have to open up and let people care about you in that way. But when they can show that in a way that's authentic, I think that's one of the most sincere ways I've seen love.
Yeah. Another thing I would encourage people to do is, ask yourself, is your response realistic? Okay. And is it in alignment with the purpose you defined for the relationship? So you might say, if you love me, you'll help me be better, right? Because relationships are meant for growth. However that looks. Helping me better means support me when I need support and challenge me when I need to be challenged. And I think another thing is it should largely be effort-based rather than outcome-based. So, I think that can be, because we can't always control outcomes, but we can control efforts. Make a sincere daily effort to make me feel supported. Maybe you don't make me feel supported make a sincere daily effort to put a smile on my face every day. Maybe there's some days you won't be able to do it, but if they love, they'll try, right? And I think it should also be clear. Whatever our rule is here, it should be clear rather than some sort of vague, make my life feel like it's a fairy tale kind of answer. It's well, what does that mean? How do you satisfy that specifically? Right? Be as specific as necessary and for main criteria for evaluating our responses, right?
I think the fact that you mentioned effort is significant because I think, especially if you're communicating this to someone else and you're trying to make it clear, if it feels like rules and it feels like they can't live up to a standard of perfection, they'll always feel like they fail. So I think I think the idea that you brought in effort is critical.
Yeah. So let's say Patty was dating this guy who dismisses things really quickly. Now, let's say he made some signs and reminders and he hung them like in his bathroom mirror, so he sees it when he's brushing his teeth. You know, and let's say the next time he meets with her, he accidentally does it the wrong thing again because of sheer habit. You know, is she going to give him more grace because at least he's making the effort, and maybe it'll happen in the right time? He'll be able to gradually shift. She would probably respect the effort, the sincere effort. But if it's just a matter of they want to dismiss the request, then that's showing that they aren't making it a priority, right? Efforts will at least show they're making a priority, even if the outcome isn't happening when we prefer it would, you know? Okay. Anyone else have any thoughts on that? Joel, you have any thoughts?
Joel had a sticky note.
Yeah, no, I think it's great as long as people are making progress, and there's so much here that's really fundamental stuff that doesn't get talked about a lot in relationships, and I think this would be really beneficial for a lot of people to see, because even those of us that have had, like, you know, I've in the past mentioned I was engaged 3 times before meeting my wife. A lot of us have had relationships, marriages, you know, and I mean, I think we're in a pretty good place where we've learned a lot, but it's like, you still can improve. Like, there's still room for improvement. And even if you've had a lot of experience. So yeah, I just think overall, this whole topic is really one that more people should take time with. And, you know, Patty, you mentioned significance, but there's also like the inverse side of significance, where sometimes people feel like, well, I don't need to work on this, I'm important. You know, people can just like kowtow to me or whatever. Like, you also have to be willing to work on things, you know, as Brennan, you've been saying, like, you have to be willing to improve. So I think that if you're probably watching this, you're probably someone that wants to like do better in life or improve, but that's kind of a requisite for wanting to be better in a relationship. Because what I found is it's on me to be a better version of myself. Like I used to, and this is why I've mentioned this before, why I've had failed, you know, attempts at marriage in the past, was I was always looking for someone to complete me, or someone I could like put myself into and like create a project and like fix someone, or, you know, something like that. And I realized I wasn't being my best self. I wasn't bringing my best self to the table. So really this whole conversation is all about how each of us can be better, can communicate better, can be better people, so that we are worthy of a relationship and not just coming in as damaged goods or broken problems that need to be fixed.
Love it. Really good points there. Really good points. I think one thing is, you know, a relationship doesn't have to be bad to get better. If a relationship's good, you can bring it to great. And if it's great, you can bring it to even more great, you know, because it can be one of the main sources of happiness in life. And then I think what you kind of defined there is a bit of a good relationship rule, which is, you know, if you love me, then you'll be willing to do what it takes to be better when it's necessary for the relationship. Because I think there is some time when it's okay, we can give ourselves some time and space from the whole self-improvement journey if we need to just recharge because we're already maximized or perhaps overwhelmed with other things going on in life. But it's like when it's necessary, we should be have the willingness to, you know, participate in our own self-understanding and to participate in our own journey towards self-realization of our potential. So, Chris,
tells you progress too. It should never be like a stagnant thing. If you get complacent in a relationship, that's kind of in a way like the death of the relationship, because like where's the fun? Where's the excitement if nothing changes? So, I mean, some people think of changing yourself as a bad thing. I think of it as like a great thing, because that's how you keep learning and progressing in life. And that's how people grow closer together.
Yeah. Yeah. So if your relationship rule is all about growth in some way, mentally, spiritually, emotionally, then, you know, we want to make sure that we do not, when complacency comes knocking on the door, that we do not let it in and sit down and have tea with it while our relationship starts to decay, right? So, Chris, did you have any thoughts?
I think Joel had a very good thought or point when he was talking about how people need to really not become that complacent, that they do push each other. that they're in harmony with each other, but in harmony with each other's growth. But growth equals pain. Growth equals problems or situations that may be uncomfortable for one or both of them.
Mhm.
So for both of them to continue to grow together, they have to be able to suffer through each other's pain and realize that they are evolving dynamic creatures, and that they're just not a static, this is the same person I met 20 years ago and it's the same person. No, people change. You have to be able to blend with that change. That person might get better than you. What happens if your belief is, I'm the man of the family, I'm supposed to provide. Then your wife gets a big promotion, is earning twice as much as you because she's growing, she's evolving. Can you support that emotionally and still be her partner? So it's important that when people are communicating, that when they're living together their long-term lives, that they can blend with the changes, the successes, and the failures of those things, big important things that happen in each other's lives.
Mhm.
Like you said, people think it's a simple sit down, security, consistent thing, but no, it is a very dynamic. Both these are two dynamic lives twining as one, and they have to deal with each other's dynamic events in their lives, both good and bad.
Nice. Nice. Okay, let's go on to number 7. Number 7 is have a realistic attraction rule. So here's what I would ask, and we should all have an answer for this. What has to happen for you to be attracted to a man or woman? Like, what has to happen for you to be attracted to them?
He has to have a great ass.
Okay, yes, I was gonna say, I hope glutes are gonna come out of your mouth right now.
Yes. Show me some glutes.
Yeah.
For me, it always comes through my head.
And what does that mean?
They have to kind of be able to set my brain on fire, like they have to charge me up, because a lot of people, it's not that interesting talking to, or you don't really find yourself challenged in a conversation. I need that challenge. I need that spark.
Yes, okay, so they have to challenge me to create that spark. Now, is that realistic? Yeah, that's
Yeah.
realistic, right? Perfect.
I think it's tough coming in sometimes with expectations that are preset, because sometimes the things you need to learn in life aren't necessarily the things you think you need to learn in life. Sometimes it comes like a 180, kung fu move at you. But I realized a lot earlier in life, and this is maybe again, a common challenge, I would base what I was looking for in someone based off just like physicality of like physical attraction. And I went through 3 failed engagements that were more or less based on that. And I realized after that I just really, the person that you're going to spend your life with has to really be your friend. Like someone you like hanging out with, you can, challenge them, they can challenge you, you can, laugh with them and like celebrate things with, like someone that you just like being around. That's the kind of person you should marry. So, I mean, at least for me. So that's something that, I think eventually thought evolves to is how you move away the metrics from physical. I mean, it's not that that's like completely, beyond the picture as well, but I don't think that should be the primary, in my opinion, the primary focus.
But that's the one thing that's going to dramatically change if you're with someone for a long time too. So that's the one thing that really won't stay constant, and I probably not really grow. I mean, really, we grow to more challenges in that area, right?
High divorce rate, and I wonder if there's just a lot of people like, they just base it on this physicality, and if people change, like you said, bodies change. Like at some point, we're all going to be old people, and it's like, we're not going to look the same as we did, but as long as you still are, you have you're married to, or find someone that's your friend or that you like hanging out with, that excites you and pushes you in life, like that's where the juice is. That's the good stuff.
So that's a really
I get
good.
that. I get that. But then answer me this. I can get that out of a female BFF. So why do I need a man?
Liz?
That was a superficial answer, but the reality is, if I'm looking to marry my best friend and be partner for life with my best friend, I already have a female BFF. Why do so what is it then that's different for me to have a male partner?
I don't
If
find
I'm
it to
just
be
looking
the
for a
same,
BFF.
but I don't have the
Okay.
same kind of relationship with men as women.
I would go back to the earlier answers in terms of defining, like what is it you're looking to have in a relationship for it to be successful? And one of those dimensions was fulfillment of passion and
That's right.
romance. And so I would say, well, are you getting this met? Yes or no?
Mhm.
And that is, and I'm saying that to honor same-sex relationships in which they are getting that met.
Correct.
They're great.
Yeah, that's the same thing. Whether it's a same-sex relationship or a heterosexual relationship, what's the difference between marrying your best friend and having your best friend? Whether it's this, whatever your sexual orientation is. For
Mhm.
me, there has got the added dynamic that's there is chemistry, passion, and romance. And I can't have that with my BFF. And
Yeah.
what creates that chemistry, romance, and passion can be intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, and physically right there for me. But if that component's not there,
Yeah. So that's really good to make sure that it's, it's compatible with what you're looking for. The main question I would say on this for the attraction rule is, does your rule have lasting power? Okay. And this is why it's important. Some people might say, for me to be attracted, I want them to demonstrate thoughtfulness, sense of humor, and affection. Great. Can they do that for a very long period of time? Yes. Someone might say, you have to be able to pursue me relentlessly no matter how much I play hard to get. And if a man does that to me, I'm attracted to them. Great. What happens when they've won you over? Well, that doesn't really have that lasting power if that's what attracts you. If somebody needs to stalk you for you to be attracted to them, like, you're probably setting yourself up for a painful cycle, right? Because of what that means to you. So the big thing is to be able to have lasting power to whatever that is, right?
okay. So now let me go the next level with this. I think that chemistry, romance, physicality is definitely a key factor. But I
Mhm.
also think it's the jet fuel that when you launch a rocket, that's what takes it. But if you don't have these other elements, okay, it ain't going to happen. I was married for 15 years. I was together for 17 years with a man who was 14 years older than me. I was definitely physically attracted to him. Great romance, great passion. He developed cancer. Once he was diagnosed with cancer and all that chemo and all that radiation, he ain't looking the same, folks. He ain't operating the same, folks. Let's just get real, okay? But I loved him more than I did when I first met him because there was depth to the relationship because we had become best friends, right? As Joel was saying. So that the physicality, when your hair falls out and all of these other things and your body's wasting away to nothing, and you become terminally ill, what keeps you in it is the depth in which that relationship develops. But if the only reason why you're in it is for the lust of the physicality, romance, and passion, that's only going to get you to the air and it's not going to get you out of the atmosphere in order to orbit.
I love it because what you're saying here is really to be attracted to someone, it requires depth of mental, emotional, and spiritual connection. Great.
That's right.
That's got lasting power. You know what? When the trials and tribulations of life come, you're going to find that you're standing strong in that relationship. You've set yourself up for success, right? All right, let's go on to number 8. What we want to have a realistic rule for what repels you from a relationship. What has to happen for you to lose interest in someone?
Fickleness.
Fickleness. That's a good one. And it's a cute word.
It's a great word, isn't
It's a
it?
little bit of an ear tickle. Fickleness. It just kind of, it's like fiddlesticks. It just rolls off the tongue. Love it. Yeah. So that might make you lose interest. What else? What might be an example?
Meanness?
Addictions.
Was that, I heard a couple things. Addictions was one, I think. Is that what I heard?
Yeah.
Addictions. And we might call that loss of control. Right?
Infidelity, you gonna put that as loss of control too, or is that a different topic?
That might also be morals. It depends.
I think, you know, I mean, I think given the situation, that can be an appropriate rule, because there's a risk if somebody's unfaithful to even your health with getting a disease or whatever, right? So that might be a realistic rule for some people, right? So, you know, somebody might say, you know, no romance, no passion. Some people might say just being too serious. Some people might say if they're making me feel bad about myself all the time, right? Somebody might say, I lose interest when I win them over because I like a challenge. You know, is that a really good rule to have? You know, so that's where somebody can be in and out of relationships all the time because they lose interest. So we want to think, you know, is your rule realistic, and does it fit with what you really want in life? You know, so that's all it is. There's no right or wrong here. I'm just saying, just make sure you're being true. Are you staying true to yourself and what you're looking for in a relationship?
I think though that there are red flags where you need to abort the mission before you commit to a relationship. And I think some of those things are abuse and infidelity, the deceit and lying, addictions, excessive need for validation because it's rooted in insecurity and lack of self-esteem and low self-image. You know, there's some, you know, that whole need to complete them kind of thing that's there, and build out their ego all the time. I mean, there are some fundamental things that are just, and then you've got all these other things that you've talked about, but there's some core things that I think are really, you know, you really got to ask yourself why. Narcissistic behavior, you know, why are we staying in that, right?
Yeah, yeah. And I think a really good answer you brought up is, you know, one thing that might repel you is lack of trust and no willingness on their behalf to participate in rebuilding trust in any meaningful way. So that's a very common one, and that would be one that you see with people that are partnered with a narcissist, where somebody has an inflated sense of self-importance. It's all about them, and they will break trust. They will make rules that are convenient to whatever they want to do, and yet there's no willingness to participate. There's no self-honesty even. They'll do gaslighting, make up excuses, make up lies, whatever they need to be. And the key thing is, you know, one of the things I tell people is, you know, you might say the relationship isn't helping you and it's not helping them. Right. That might be like, okay, well, why are we doing this? It's not helping you and it's not helping me. Why are we doing this? It's just an endless cycle of you doing bad things and justifying it, or making up lies to try to, you know. So that might be a realistic rule for us, right? So anyway, we got some good ones there. Any other thoughts on what has to happen for you to feel repelled from a relationship?
There's no reciprocity.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, yeah. So they are a taker.
Feels one-sided. So I'm not sure how to put this in words exactly, but something I heard, I think it was yesterday, they were talking about people who are really empathetic, and that can be a really good quality to have. But then if you're with someone that is more narcissistic, they can try to twist that on you. And if you try to stand up for yourself, they'll tell you, oh, I thought you're this empathetic person. You're not acting very empathetic. And they can try to redefine kind of who you are when you're trying to stand up for yourself. And so I think if you're trying to stand up for yourself and someone is shutting you down, that I think is a huge rule for me.
Yeah. So manipulation.
Manipulation. There we go. Much better.
That's what we're looking for. That's a good one.
Yeah.
You know, and I think it's important to identify these because sometimes we are unrefined and immature in our ability to select somebody to be in a relationship with. And then we realize like, oh my gosh, like I just want to be with somebody that's not a compulsive liar. I can't believe that wasn't even on my list. It's such a basic thing. Like, oh my gosh, just don't be a compulsive narcissistic liar. Like, it's like, how unrefined was my radar before? But this is what helps us do that, the reflection. Self-awareness can lead to better self-regulation with future relationships.
I did read something once though, that when people are doing their dating profiles, they usually are advertising the bad things that have happened to them. So they would say, I'm not interested in compulsive liars or, narcissists or whatever. You start to advertise the things because that's when you're aware of it, right? So while it's good for us to know, it's not the way you want to put it out to the world.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's go on to number 9. Get clear on the necessary necessities. What is absolutely necessary in your relationships? If you were to be your own relationship coach, what advice would you give for the success of your relationship? What rules or agreements should be followed? And I'd say don't filter your answer, but just go on a rant and you can sort out your answers later. How can you keep each other happy, loved, and supported? What are your thoughts on this one? Anyone have any thoughts on the necessary necessities?
Trust.
Yeah. Without trust, what do you got, right?
I mean, honesty, it's just all these core things that if you don't have it, what's the point?
Yep. I agree. Without trust, once trust is broken and like I said, and there's no willingness. So willingness to participate.
My wife said that the main reason she married me was because I was always willing to work on myself and try to make things better and learn from mistakes. And that was something that was really important to her. So I think that, it's always great to be willing to grow.
I think that's a really good one. Willingness to participate in your own self-development and growth. That's a huge one. And so many people are too busy trying to find an excuse rather than trying to find a way to ever be better and wiser. They're always justifying and defending everything and fighting to stay the same rather than fighting to be a better version of themselves all the time. Right?
Or buy things, or they go to the gym, they work on their appearance or their possessions, and they don't really work on the inside stuff that makes a bigger difference.
Yeah.
I think not just investing in yourself, but being willing to invest in the other person as well.
Yep. Great.
And I think having a shared, this is kind of what Joel and Charmaine said, but having a shared identity of we, that we're operating in tandem with a hierarchy of priorities that includes work, family, friends, our relationship, our passion projects, and so forth. And but that shared identity of we, rather than just you and me operating individually in this relationship, I think is crucial. Effective communication, we talked about that. Somebody who's optimistic, realist, of course, but this negative, self-critical, all of that stuff, because we are all in growth mindset, none of us could live underneath that for any length of time and come out healthy. I mean, we can't. We've come too far. We know too much.
Yeah, I mean, some people will want to submit you to their mental poison.
Yeah.
And they will justify it. They'll go on rants about the news and complaining about this and complaining about that. And it's all mental poison. They don't see it that way, but it's not our job sometimes to help them see what they don't want to see. They're not done with that experiment of living their life that way. Coots, do you have any thoughts on this one? Or any thoughts? All right, we're back.
Yeah, you
All right.
back to the bare necessities.
Whatever you said, I'm just going to have to ask you to repeat it.
It was-
'cause
It was great.
All
Bob.
the
The one and
bare
done.
necessities, the simple bare necessities. Forget about your worries and your strife.
It's literally in my
bare
head.
necessities, all Mother Nature's recipes that bring the bare necessities of life.
Oh,
thanks
Daddy,
for that.
La Fuega
Thanks,
is
Bill.
on fire.
That was great. That was great.
Awesome. So, Coots, I don't know if you said anything.
I just said, I reiterated that trust was the most important. I don't think of any useful relationship without it.
Okay, perfect. Why don't we go into the second last category, number 10. What do you think are the success rules for a good relationship? So you want to get clear on what your answers are and clear on what your partner's answers are. So for example, Coots said, always be dating, right? Do the things you did that were successful in the beginning of a relationship, always making time for each other, get a babysitter if you got lots of kids, do it once a week, always be dating might be one. You might have an example like mutually agreed upon time or distance apart. You might say, hey, I'm going to need, I want to have my own time alone on Sundays to read and reflect and do whatever spiritual things, or I'm going to need some time to get together with my friends, like you might want to have something where, a success rule might be treat the bad times with care, right? Like keep your problems impersonal. It's both of you against the problem, like always operate as a team, like Patty said, giving people the space to be who they are. Don't try to change them, change yourself and lead by example. Like have realistic expectations. People make mistakes all the time. Anyone else have any thoughts? Like what are some general rules that you think are important?
I think time that we spend with the kids is important. A lot of times, especially in today's culture, we have blended families and each of us have kids. And so it's important to, figure out where the priorities are on different projects and kids.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And ailing parents, there's all of these things, but we need to know where the priorities are.
Get the priorities in order and be clear on where your priorities stand. Yeah.
Also interesting, like spiritual alignment. Initially when I was younger, I kind of thought like I needed to find somebody that thought the way that I thought.
Mm-hmm.
And then, like I said, I went through an engagement or two and I was like, I really should be able to, like, even though I have my own spiritual beliefs about God and life and the universe and spirit, I should be able to, like, get married to someone that believes something completely different and make that work. And then I kind of eventually realized that you really need you need some core things in common. Like it can be different things, but if, you have to find some agreements on some of those core things. And so my challenge now, and I think we've been married, 17, 18 years. I probably should know the answer to that. Is that, so we do have these core fundamental spiritual pursuits, but she also has her own little like variation on that. And there were times where that like struck me in the wrong way, like you're getting away from what I think, so it's affecting me. When in reality, like I need to be supporting wherever someone goes to challenge themselves, to grow, then it might look different for somebody else. But we live in a very, patriarchal society where it's like you have this male dominated thing of like, this is the way that it is. And you see that played out in, places like Iran and other countries. And it really should be supporting their growth as long as people are growing in positive directions. And that's something I've been working on with me.
So I'm going to summarize that and say, support them in their own journey up the mountain of truth. They might take a slightly different route, but you can find alignment in the fact you're both heading to the same destination. There might be a way that just works a little better for them. Maybe they resonate with a different spiritual teacher than you do, but both spiritual teachers are saying the same things just in a different way, and maybe they look a little different, right?
As a pastor Christian pastor and evangelist, for me, it's important that my partner believes in God and also is on a spiritual path, then has some sort of spiritual practice. Now, I say that, but there's a whole other side, which is my passion projects and pursuits, that I want a partner that's willing to go with me when I go preach on Sunday, right? And willing to come alongside with me and support me in the ministry work. But if they're not in that area, right? This isn't just, for me, it's more than just my spiritual practice. Okay. So not only am I okay, I have to be okay with the fact that they believe in a creator and that they have a spiritual practice, but then they need to be able to support what I'm doing here. And not all the time has that been the case because of what Joel said, this whole patriarchal society that we live in that kind of gets a little bit sideways. So I think it really kind of depends. We're talking about spiritual development here, but if somebody else has a life path, then we need to seek a partner that looks for that. You know, I was married to a firefighter for 4 years. I was vying for vice president of marketing for an international frozen food manufacturer. I cannot do that path and have a firefighter that lives in California with all the forest fires and everything else that happens and the schedule that they have over there. That type of path for me, for my career, doesn't work. Okay, we parted ways over dinner because that life path developed at a very young age. We were married at 20 and divorced at 24. And I say this as another example because it's not just spiritual, but in other life paths, in aspects of our lives, retirement, children, where we want to live, travel, and so forth. Those things have to be talked about as well for success.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think one key thing where people can get a little confused on the spiritual side of things is maybe like when you meet somebody, you don't have the exact same spiritual path, but as long as you're both devoted to the ultimate truth of what's really going on, then that's all that matters. Somebody might reject the concept of God, but they've only been given a very confusing rumor about what God is, but they're still interested in knowing what the true creator is. Then you might actually be in spiritual alignment because they're devoted to truth, even though they're on a more confusing part of that journey, right? And then you might find you're in alignment. It's just they haven't really been able to clarify that yet.
Who could possibly get a confusing idea of God? I mean, all the religions have this non-monetary, pure, non-fear-driven sense of like, hey, look, here's the creator.
Yeah, exactly.
And the opposite of that is, for me personally, if somebody comes to me and says they're religious, it's a turnoff. Because I don't want to get into the dogma of God. I want to get into the spirituality of God. So it really comes down to your spiritual alignment in a lot of ways. So I really like what you said about that, Joel.
Yeah, I love it. Perfect. So some other things we might say for success rules in relationships. I'm a big fan of don't give advice unless they're begging for it, because unasked for advice is actually like criticism. So I'll just say, you're smart enough to figure it out on your own, and I'll wait for somebody to ask, what would you do? So I think that's a big one. Never use certain words. Like don't give try to avoid like we're using the words like divorce or, no matter how bad things get, it's best to have the attitude, hey, you're stuck with me. I get it. You're having a bad day and this and that, but you're stuck with me no matter what. So try to avoid, like, have the attitude, we're going to figure this out even if it kills us. How to make this relationship work is a good attitude to have rather than always threatening to leave and this and that and whatever. So I think that might be a good rule in some situations. So let's go on to the next category. Final one.
11. What was 11?
We made it to 11. Okay. Be clear on the activities that bring you both closer together. Okay. Be clear on what those activities are. What are the things you do that bring you closer together? There are some things that research has shown that does help bring couples closer together. And I think it's important to be intentional about this and strategic with this, right? Like, for example, connect over soothing music. It puts the brain in a good space to actually connect with somebody. It doesn't take much effort. Experiment with together, like try new things together, new challenges with each other. Maybe go on a unique retreat together, try a new sport together, like squash, try out a different restaurant together, or new board games, whatever. Lots of experimentation. Do something scary together, like, maybe go like skydiving or something like that. And it can show you how caring they are when you need their support. Serve together. Do like some sort of volunteer work or some sort of altruistic work together. Travel together is a great way to connect. You get really high quality time. There's also the teamwork element that gets further refined in the planning and the dealing with the spontaneity and everything else. You could go on nature walks together, exercise together, take time to draw out a vision of what you want the relationship to be, like actually have a conversation about how you want the relationship to look in 5 or 10 years. These are all some ideas that are kind of like classic proven ideas for just bringing yourselves closer together. Who else has some ideas to add to this, or maybe some specific ideas from these categories? Any thoughts?
Spicing it up in the bedroom.
Yeah, of course.
Show your glutes more. Just kidding.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think if you can do something that incorporates all of the senses, it anchors the relationship. So you mentioned music, but if you're having music and you're making a meal together and you've got candles going, right? So we've got something like that. Also experiential. So you've listed some of those things, and new, for both of you. Also something that you're going to learn together that you both don't know anything about. So we've never done pottery. Have you done pottery? No, I haven't. Let's go learn how to do some pottery. Now it's a learning experience. So that's another one.
It's great. Like take a cooking class together.
Yeah.
Right. Like I remember doing that with my wife. We took a cooking class and it was hilarious. And it was like, there's a lot of just mutual respect and support because neither of us had a clue what the heck we were doing. And it's just about, finding the harmony and the camaraderie in that. Right? Charmaine, any thoughts on activities that bring you together with people?
I think new is a big word. And that's always something that comes to mind for me, because if it's a new experience, you're on an even playing field. It could also be something that really means a lot to you that you share with the other person. My best friend and I have a Google list where we put in places that we've never been, that we're interested in going. And then when you have one of those evenings, what do you want to do? We go through the list. And so we always have a ready-made list of options. So that's something that works for us.
Excellent. Chris, do you have any thoughts?
Traveling, day trips or weekend trips. Some of the best times I had with Marge was when we went to Niagara Falls, or we went to Richmond, Virginia. So, those adventures in different places and doing different things, like doing the Segway tours, going out to Niagara by the lake, which is a totally different area away from between Toronto and Niagara Falls. That very nice wine country. No one knows it's even there. Well, for us Americans at least. And having those type of adventures. And making those adventures on the fly, not just planning them, but now we're here. Let's go find something that's 2 hours away and go do that.
Love it. Joel, any thoughts?
I was just writing some down. I know that my wife loves to like do new things, new adventures. One of the things we try to do is like go somewhere warm each winter. Just it could be little stuff. Go for a hike somewhere new. Just keep it like. I really like the concept. Circling back at the beginning. Talking about like dating your spouse. Like I haven't really thought of it that way, and it's a really great way to think about it because sometimes there can be a complacency of like, and it's not even an intentional complacency, but it's just like, you get into these routines and you do the same things over and over again, and you're just kind of going through the motions. And it's great to like keep things spontaneous and fresh. We have like a hot tub. It's like a swim spot. It's a big one. And we realized we hadn't really like used it that much. Like our kids are in it like every day, but it was just nice, like to be in a moonlight, like talk about life and sit in a hot tub or like sit in a bubble bath and like talk about things like Patty mentioned with candles, like make it special. I took the kids and particularly the kids, but the kids and wife to a waterfall and brought like a tea party, and we just set a blanket out and like just do something that's memorable. So I think for me, I think when you get to the end of this life experience, you'll remember the memories that you made. They're really memorable things. And so I think those are the things to really focus on.
I love it. I love it. That's such a good way to like add some juice to a relationship, is to create something extraordinary out of the ordinary, right? Make the little moments in life special. Celebrate the small victories in life. Go to a restaurant just to celebrate the fact you paid the water bill. Why not? It's just like have a, it's just like make things a game whenever you can, right? Find ways to create fun surprises for each other. Like, my wife and I, there's a certain stuffed animal we have that we'll set it up in the house doing different things all the time and like make up a story about what it's getting into and everything else just for fun. Is like an ongoing joke that we've been doing for like a couple years now, right? Like if she goes away, I'm setting that thing up, doing something with her stuff. It's like an ongoing thing, right? So, Dave, any thoughts?
No, I like nature walks is one of the ones we like to do. We just like nature in general. And I realized I don't love nature, or I love it, of course, but it wasn't loving it as much as she was. There'd be a heavy rainstorm, and she's just like really excited, and that makes me excited. So like the more we can go to like that amazing vast field or whatever it might be, I like experiencing what she enjoys. So like nature hikes or nature cottage getaways is kind of our go-to.
Go feed some watermelon to raccoons.
Yeah, right? Dude, your place. Yeah, she's never gonna forget that. Like that's in her like memory bank till the end.
Yeah. So awesome. I love it. I think another good thing that I want to add to the list is learn more about each other. Every person is a world to explore. And one of the things I might say is like, sometimes I'll say to my wife, like, tell me something about your childhood that you've never told me before, right? It'll be like a funny saying from a movie or some little event that happened one day growing up that she never told me before, just to understand them on a deeper level. So I think that's an important thing. Like always be learning more about each other. Like don't think every person is totally a mystery with so much more to understand about them and their journey and their experiences. And I think it's just making the intention to understand more about them. And I think another thing to do is, tell them things you appreciate about them and make it a daily habit. Like literally that brings people closer together. Just show appreciation and be very specific and clear on it and make it a daily habit. Like it's simple, but it does bring people, and you'll notice that when you appreciate them, they appreciate you back, right? So anyways, we've got our 11 items we've gone over right here, okay, for relationship success rules. Number 1, know what not to do. Number 2, have a proper purpose. What is the purpose of your primary relationship? Is it fun? Is it focused on growth? Everything else. Number 3, know your relationship success indicator and that it's also appropriate. Number 4, clarify the communication needs. Communicate about communication, right? Number 5, understand each other's fight language, right? And how to harmonize with that. Number 6, know what love means to you, right? And then make sure that that's realistic, in alignment with the relationship and everything else. Number 7, have a realistic attraction rule. Make sure that it's something with lasting power. You're attracted to something that's lasting. Like not like I need to be attracted to somebody who's got a lot of money and a good job, because what happens if they lose their job to no fault of their own or whatever, right? Number 8, have a realistic rule for what repels you from a relationship. Number 9, get clear on the necessary necessities. Number 10, have set out your success rules for a good relationship. And number 11 is be clear on what brings you together, the activities you can do to bring yourselves closer together. Key takeaways from tonight's discussion. Key takeaways. I'm just going to start and say it's important to get clear on how to make a relationship the best it can be. Don't leave it to chance. We don't leave important things in life to chance. Reflecting can bring clarity, and clarity brings power. So we want to find out what needs to be remembered, and then remember what needs to be remembered to create relationship success. Charmaine, any key takeaways, anything that stood out for you from today's discussion?
I think what we had talked about when we're looking at effort, I think that's important. And the other thing, and this is something, I've made it a practice to do, it's when conflict occurs, it's important to discuss the conflict later when no one's feeling heated or impassioned about it, and just kind of talk about what happened and how it could have gone differently. Like, what was it that really made things go awry? And sometimes we learn a little bit about our language or how we approach things then. And I think it's good to get that clarity in the moments that we're not wound up about it.
I love it. So, you bring up 2 good points, is that usually like intense emotion abhors reason. People can't be reasoned with when they get overly emotional. And then the other thing is, if you don't understand where a wrong turn was made, you're almost sure to set yourself up for more of the same wrong turn in future. Especially if people don't want to talk about it. It's like, I don't want to acknowledge where a wrong turn was made, so I can promise you more of the past pain in the future, because I'm going to make that wrong turn again, right? Which is also an unwillingness to participate in their own self-development, right? So beautiful points. Love it. Patty, key takeaways from today.
It is just as going to the gym and getting medical checkups and doing research for vehicles you're going to buy and all of the other stuff. Until you work through your own emotional trauma and your heartache, you are going to be in one bad relationship after another. You've got to do the work on yourself. And what you are attracted to when you're broken will disgust you when you're healed. And so I think doing the work is important. So when you're coming out of a bad relationship, or you're coming out of any relationship, I think it's good to take the time to do some self-reflection, even if that includes some therapy or counseling, to a trusted friend, something like that, a mentor, disciple, so that you can work through where you've been, where you are, so that you can redirect yourself and grow out of the relationships, which is what we said at the beginning.
Beautiful, beautiful points. Love it. Yeah. And you brought up an important point, which is, every hero needs a guide, right? Frodo had Gandalf, Luke Skywalker had Yoda. And when it comes to relationships, you might need to lean in on the support of somebody who can help you understand things from a higher perspective, so that you can figure out what you truly want and make decisions that are in alignment with what you truly want for yourself. Right? So it's like, we can all benefit from having a coach or a guide. Every Olympic athlete has a coach. It's not that they can't do it on their own. A coach helps you get further than you could on your own. Right? So whatever that looks like in your life. Chris, can you hear me?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Key takeaways from tonight.
I think it was a great talk about relationships, basics and foundations. And everyone is right when they were talking about having to do the work, having a strong foundation as an individual before you get into a relationship. Because otherwise, the relationships are feeding those broken, unhealed, wounded parts. When there's one wounded person in a relationship, there's always 2. There's never just one. But as you build yourself up personally and make yourself more centered and take care of your own issues, you're more capable of being a partner in a relationship and not just having your emotional needs met. And that's such a key distinction. In a lot of relationships, you start looking at those things deeply, either your relationship is going to grow like crazy or it's going to go to an overdue grave. And I think that's just such an important aspect of getting into relationships, knowing A, if you're ready for a relationship, and B, what are those pieces so that they're in place when you start going out in relationships. When I started going dating, women were getting ready to retire in 9 years with a 401k, and there's things that, because of my working with the family business, I don't have those things. So how was I going to what am I bringing to the table of the relationship? What can I give to the relationship? Not only myself, but think logistics to make the relationship a long-term relationship where we can grow old together.
I love it. And a good point you bring up, and I'm not sure if you said it in these exact words, but it's like we should be good at dating ourselves first before we try to date other people. Which is basically...
that's a perfect way of looking at it, because if you don't like you, the other people are not going to like you as well. And when those parts come out in the relationships after 3 months, the casual dating phase is like in 3 months, you're just kind of, reading brochure, kicking the tires. But then when it starts to get real, it's just like, do you want to move in together? That becomes a very different situation. Are you ready for going after 3 months and living with this person? And that's, so are you prepared to have that happen? So you really have to be ready for that when you start relationships. Not to, you want to be ready for that if that occurs.
Yeah, love it. Love it. Absolutely. All right, Joel, key takeaways from tonight.
I mean, it's kind of the theme here, but like muscle, like you gotta, I've used this metaphor before, but if you buy an exercise machine and put it in the corner and don't use it, you're not going to get fit. It's just going to sit there. And so what I'm realizing is that a lot of this stuff that's talked about, even though I think that I'm like probably slightly above average with in general relationship things, which is by far no means, the end all, I realize I have so much more to do, like so much, which is to be a better person myself, which is to communicate better, which is to, do these little things for people, to treat someone like you're dating them in a good way, like to always try to make it better. And it's so easy to just, like I said before, get complacent and kick back and hit cruise control and like let the relationship just go through days and weeks and months. And like, if there's not growth, to me, growth is the good stuff, and celebrating and moving and transforming and even little stuff. So yeah, it puts the onus on me to really do my best and be better than the day before.
Nice. I think that's a good way to sum it up. Just be committed to putting in the effort to be a little bit better than the day before. Love it. And Cootsy Patootsy.
Yeah, it's funny. I was looking at the notes here from 1 to 11, and I see a very common theme, and that is growth, right? So right away, we see that having a proper purpose in your relationship, we said that growth is a huge foundation. And then when Patty's talking about she needs to see that person is growing, maybe maturing or growing mentally or growing emotionally. And then we see clarifying communication needs. Well, maybe something that you're good at, so you have to grow into that role. And then we also had Chris, who had mentioned that growing equals pain, not something you want to forget, because something new you suck at for a while. Growth always takes a little bit. And then even down at the bottom here, where we're talking about being clear on activities that bring you close together, that's something you might grow into like when you first start. So I just see kind of like what was the last one here? It was another one where growth stuck. Willingness to participate in own self-development and growth. Like the amount of times I wrote growth is gross. And there's a lot, right? There's so many, right? But yeah, I think that really sums up a lot of one of the key foundations that can almost answer all of these 11 points.
Love it. Very well said. Okay, everybody, awesome conversation tonight. And I just want to honor all of you for having this conversation as a gift of love and caring to whoever out there might benefit from watching it, because, we are strangers perhaps to you, but strangers care. And, somewhere beyond this all, we're all spirit friends anyway, just trying to help each other out as we continue on the pilgrimage from ignorance to understanding in all things. And we continue to progress from suffering to wisdom to ultimately joy. I think that's where we all want to go, and that's where we're all heading. And I think we all get there a little better when we help each other out. And that's what nights like tonight are all about. Relationships are a key part of that journey from suffering to wisdom to joy, right? So because we're all in this together, let's do a big go team on 3, fist bump, group hug. We're out till next time, okay? Everybody ready for this? Everybody ready? Okay, here we go. And oh, oh, that's my wife. I gotta get going right now. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3, go team.
Go
Go
team.
team.
Love you guys. Enjoy
Bye,
your
guys.
trip, Brendan. See you all next
Have a good week.